about a month ago, the push began in earnest from the Bush administration, refocus the upcoming election campaign on 9/11. And then came Bob Woodward's new book, State of Denial, and a disturbing story of warnings perhaps ignored by Condoleezza Rice 2 months and a day before the attacks. All right, how about a refocus? In our third story in the countdown, the meeting between then National Security Advisor Rice and top counter-terror experts, now described as a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. And Ms. Rice's own spokesman finally confirming the session, saying that Ms. Rice urged Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld and then Attorney General John Ashcroft to receive the same briefing. The Woodward assertion that by July 10, 2001, CIA Director George Tenet and his counterterrorism chief, Cofer Black, presented, quote, intelligence showing the increasing likelihood that al-Qaeda would soon attack the U.S. He also reported that now Secretary Rice was polite during the briefing, but that the CIA officials felt the brush off. Rice had said she couldn't recall such a meeting, all evidence to the contrary. Now her chief spokesman has finally confirmed the session took place on or around July 10, 2001, but he hastens to add, quote, the information presented in this meeting was not new, rather it was a good summary from the threat reporting from the previous several weeks. That characterization contradicted in Woodward's book. He described it as, quote, the starkest warning the CIA officials had given the White House on bin Laden and al-Qaeda. And an unnamed senior intelligence official who helped prepare the briefing has now described it as, quote, a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. The briefing was intended to connect the dots contained in other intelligence reports and paint a very clear picture of the threat posed by bin Laden. Indeed, according to her current spokesman, now Secretary Rice asked that this same information be briefed to Secretary Rumsfeld and then Attorney General Ashcroft about a week later. A Pentagon spokesman says he has no information about what Rumsfeld may have then been told. Mr. Ashcroft says he was never briefed by Mr. Tenet or Mr. Black.
If there had been such a meeting that had taken place with Ms. Rice, and she had been told that there was a domestic threat, that was, you know, and that was the feature of the meeting, I'm surprised that they wouldn't have such a briefing for the Attorney General as well.
To summarize this, according to Secretary Rice's own spokesman, she thought the briefing contained nothing new, yet apparently felt it was important enough for both Rumsfeld and Ashcroft to be similarly informed. Joining us now for his perspective, once again, Paul Kurtz, who, as the National Security Council's Director for Counterterrorism during the first 8 months of the Bush administration, served as Richard Clark's right-hand man. Mr. Kurtz, thank you again for some of your time tonight, sir.
It's good to be back. Thank you for asking.
You know, this is the first time we've spoken with you since Woodward's reporting of this July 10th meeting. Dr. Rice's spokesman says nothing new. It was nothing new, but the National Archives is showing that Mr. Tenet thought that what Cofer Black had told him was so important, he'd called for a car in an urgent rush, and he'd asked for an immediate meeting at the White House with Dr. Rice. Are these views as contradictory as they seem? Do we know which one is closest to the facts at that time?
Well, I think we have to take Woodward's assertion in some context. If you go back to the March time frame, we were getting a great deal of intelligence information coming through a variety of sources saying that some sort of an attack was going to take place. Hostages might be taken. We might have a storming of an embassy. And the National Security Council and the CIA and FBI were all working with a great deal of information. This information was being passed up to Dr. Rice and Steve Hadley, her deputy, and dispersed among other agencies. And if you look at the 9/11 Commission report, you know, it's very clear in Chapter 8 of the report that the system was blinking red. It was clear that something was coming of a spectacular nature. So this assertion that this particular meeting was of tremendous volume, was something different than everything seen before, I'm not so sure, given the overall context of what was going on in the summer of 2001.
The CIA director, Mr. Tenet, apparently disagrees intensely with Mr. Woodward on one point, saying he thought that Dr. Rice did understand the gravity of that, what he told her and what Cofer Black told her in that meeting. But if that's correct and Dr. Rice understood the gravity, did that gravity get turned off? Did it disappear somewhere?
No, I don't think so. From what she said, she asked that other principals be briefed, the Secretary of Defense and the Attorney General, and that's appropriate. In fact, that happens all the time. When someone receives a briefing, they ask that others within the administration be briefed. So that part is normal. I think what the failure here that we have, a failure as a government, is at the strategic level. In other words, we had report after report after report coming in, but the NSC, the cabinet level officers looking after our homeland security and national security, did not meet until September 11. It was an ad hoc approach until that time. It's not to say, though, I want to be clear, that during the summer of 2001, a great deal of activity was underway at the operational level. In other words, making sure the FAA knew what was going on, getting the word out to the FBI offices across the United States, getting word overseas. But there was no real specific information that could help us understand exactly what was coming on September 11th.
Theoretically, there could probably be 1,000 answers to the question why, if this meeting is being spotlighted in retrospect, this July 10th meeting, the briefing, why it was not a focus of the 9/11 Commission report. Is there one answer to that, or are we just looking too hard at one spot along a spectrum?
We may be looking at one spot too hard along that spectrum. I think what we're going to see over time as people go to the National Archives and they look at the materials that the 9/11 Commission put together, that there are going to be different facts that will come out, if you will, that will be highlighted more than others. And historians will ultimately have their view. They'll put nuances on different events as to, what ultimately happened and what was important. I think it is important to think about the 9/11 Commission being a bipartisan group, working together to bring together these facts in one place.
Paul Kurtz, National Security Council Director for Counterterrorism at Richard Clark's side in the critical months before 9/11. Once again, sir, we thank you for your time.
Thank you for asking me.